have progressed this far and this fast without you. I will say that we are in conversations with the county office just today and Friday. We're optimistic that they will be giving us some good news this week. And as we move forward, we'll continue to work with them on some of these ideas around position control, around cash management, around interfund borrowing, around supplemental early retirement plans, analysis and implementation, around our pension reporting for our adult ed STRs, around routine restricted maintenance, around our special education and maintenance of efforts requirements, around our computer system, infrastructure and implementation, and around our multi-year projections. Those are our ideas going forward with, in collaboration with the county, and I encourage all of us to support one another and each other as we walk through this way in a way that makes us proud and true to what we believe. It's going to be difficult. It has been difficult, and the best way to do this is by walking together. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Dr. Janney. And now we'll have I appreciate your message, as I'm sure the rest of the board does as well. And now we will have a report from our student board rep, Brenna Pangelinen.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it working? There we go. Hi, everyone. So at my last President's Council meeting, I was able to hear a little bit about Chula Vista High School. So I would like to share a little bit about that high school with you guys, where they glow and where they could grow. So it was great to hear that Chula Vista High School is a place of a lot of school spirit. As a visual and performing arts school, their VAPA programs are very strong and are integrated into school life and culture, especially because a large portion of the school is involved in VAPA programs. It was really interesting to hear that many students love their the possibility of taking 8 different courses, which allows for flexibility with schedules and an easier time reaching school requirements while also having all of their extracurriculars. They also love their extensive tutoring system offered at their school. It really is a great outlet for students to reach out for help if it is needed. Also, on top of just extra tutoring that is offered after school, many students like the ARC program that is offered at Chula Vista High School for students after school who maybe do not have rides, and driver's education, SAT prep, and many other programs are offered after school for those who don't have rides home. Although those are all great, they do have some places that they could grow. Chula Vista, being one of the oldest schools in our district, does pose some issues. Assemblies, for example, can become difficult with a gym that doesn't have a very well-functioning AC, especially in hot seasons. Some 2-story buildings can be difficult to deal with when there isn't elevators that are functioning properly. Some students also were voicing that they don't believe there is a large variety of AP and accelerated classes, which can kind of hinder the learning opportunities offered for every student. There's also becoming an apparent problem with a switch to paperless learning. So they have tried to go completely paperless, but as many people know, some teachers don't utilize the technology that is given to them in a way that's seamless yet. So as of now, there is just an issue without having paper to provide their students for assignments. However, Chula Vista is definitely unique with its many VAPA programs and just the environment that it creates for all of its students. At our President's Council meeting, we also, as everybody knows, discussed the budget issue that has, the budget discussions that have been without the district. And I have definitely felt and sensed anxiety from students, not only in my own classrooms, but from students all over the district. You know, not every student is attending board meetings or can necessarily comprehend extensive budget reports, but that doesn't discount student concern. Many students have reached out to me, whether it be directly or through administration, and passed on to me. And that idea that Dr. Janney mentioned of just that collaborative effort definitely needs to be extended to the students, because we are the ones that, you know, hopefully will not be affected in the process, but there's a possibility, and the connection and the communication is going to be essential in ensuring that the plans that are hopefully going to be least impact to the students are actually least impact to the students. So with that said, the President's Council and I were trying to figure out the best way possible to utilize student voice and to get them best integrated into this process, just to add on to that collaborative effort. So we thought about different ways to go about this, and we decided the best way for now would be to allow guests to come to our President's Council meetings if they have opinions or if they want to help out in any way possible. So students can come to our President's Council meetings. I will be in contact with anybody that wants to come, and I will hopefully be able to present those opinions and present those ideas to anybody that needs it. If there is increasing interest, I will act accordingly and hopefully come up with the best solution, just to get students to feel like they have a voice, and also just to create more understanding about what's going on, so there hopefully can be a decrease in the anxiety that I'm seeing throughout all of the schools. So thank you.
Thank you for that report. So this is the point of the agenda where members of the public may address the board on any matter not on the agenda and have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer the matter to the Superintendent's Office for review and report. Thank you for your cooperation. Are there any speakers?
Yes, Jean Chavira.
Good evening, President Hall, Superintendent Jenny, board, staff. I'm Jean Chavira, president of the Sweetwater Education Association. As president, I've been having to go to visit sites and explain why SEA has decided to work with the district on our financial crisis. So as I go and I explain the timeline and how we came to the conclusion that it was in our best interest to work with the district to find a solution. I explained to them that not only did SEA come to that conclusion, but the other 5 bargaining units came to that same conclusion. As I'm talking to staff in these different schools that I go to, one of the things that comes up is accountability. And I'm glad to hear Dr. Jenny, you take the blame for this tonight. So that was one of the main things. One of the other things is they want assurance that this will not happen again and how it happened. When I first learned of the financial crisis, the first thing that came to my mind, of course, was our adult school teachers, because I knew that they are the most vulnerable members of my unit. And so I know that they are the ones that are, like I said, the most vulnerable, and they're the ones that are going to suffer. When I go to my members and they ask about the 2 PD days that they're going to give, or the furlough days, it comes out to 0.54% of their income. So in other words, the 2 days is 1%, 1.08% of their income. But on the other hand, the adult school teachers are going, in some cases, going to suffer greatly. And so it just doesn't seem fair. And I'm asking you to do and to try to figure other ways that you can deal with this problem other than making my adult school teachers really suffer. The overall impression I get after I've explained to my members why it's in our best interest is, of course, to go ahead and work with the district. There are some, of course, that would rather see us turned over to the state. So I don't know what their motivation is or what their thinking is. But overall, most of my members understand the situation in that we're in. They understand that we had a heavy hand in the way things are at Sweetwater, and we don't want them to go back to the way they were. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Shears.
At the last board meeting, Trustee Tarantino recommended a cut in the per diem you trustees received. His recommendation was to rescind the increase the last board voted in. To say that I was shocked not to find this recommendation in the form of an agenda item on this evening's docket is putting it mildly. First, we called you out on your absences claimed as hardships like vacations that you were paying yourselves for. It took 3 years and Ms. Vicedo being thrown under the bus for you to finally do the right thing. Now, after being asked by Trustee Tarantino, Ms. Hall, you, as president of the board, have the authority to agendize Trustee Tarantino's recommendation, yet you failed to do so. Why? How can you expect our valuable teachers, administrators, and employees to give up thousands when you're not prepared to relinquish hundreds? Something is wrong with this scenario, very wrong. Adding insult to injury, rumors abound that temporary adult ed teachers like Dottie Griffin, a 35-year dedicated educator, may be losing her job. Based on this failure, Ms. Hall, Maddie Adato has prepared and sent an email to Ms. Vicedo, clerk of the board. She is doing your job, requesting the item be put on the agenda per bylaw 9322. Ms. Hall, if you were an employee of our district versus San Diego's, wouldn't you expect this very board to do what Mr. Tarantino recommended and what Ms. Adato was requesting? Share alongside all employees the burden of returning to solvency? A failure to agree with this is signifying to those you represent and oversee you are not held to the same standards. This point in time will define us. We often tout Sweetwater as a family, and yes, like a family, there will be issues we find ourselves in disagreement on. But it is times like these where we must find a way to unite for the good of all. Lest we forget we are all in this for one benefit, our students. Am I saying no mealy maikai? Definitely not. All deserve a detailed explanation, one that can be understood by every member of the Sweetwater family. There are lessons to be learned here, changes that must be made. Those lessons, changes must be the subject where all suggestions are considered. Our students, we taxpayers, are looking to you employees, all of you, because we acknowledge the parts form the whole. Having said that, please know, we realize it's easy for us who are not financially at risk to ask for this sacrifice. I am perfectly aware it is always you employees who are consistently expected to bear the sacrifice. In closing, teachers, employees, administrators, while it might not mean much, please know we appreciate you. And yes, I know appreciation doesn't put food on the table, clothes on your children, or money to pay your mortgage. Dr. Janney, based on your comments tonight, I recommend this board dissolve our audit subcommittee as it is crystal clear based on our situation. It has served no purpose.
Patricia Vega.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Janney. I'm here tonight to return the Putting Students First shirt. As you can see, it is brand new. My husband received it last year while a teacher at Castle Park High, but never wore it because he always felt that students at CPH are not a priority at this school. Here are a few reasons why. Before Ms. Mitrovich was named school principal, a group of CPH staff members and students wrote and signed a letter requesting that their new principal be someone who knew the needs of the students and was familiar with the parents and community. They had in mind Mr. Alvarado, who was at that time an effective assistant principal, loved and respected by the students, parents, and staff. For whatever reason, you did not listen to students and staff and named Ms. Mitrovich as principal. After years of turmoil and interim principals, the least you could have done is name a principal more in tune with the community. As it is, only a few students know who the principal is. 2, counselors are not readily available to deal with students' issues. Frequently, counselors come in late and leave early, or they'll take their breaks during students' lunch or nutrition break. Furthermore, Spanish language skills are very limited to communicate effectively with parents and students in a school with a large number of English learners. 3, in addition to counselor availability, there is a morally questionable situation between 2 of the counselors who are romantically involved. The concern about that is many times they bring their personal issues into the counseling center, making it extremely stressful and inappropriate for staff and students. This also creates a conflict of interest since any concerns that arise among the counselors or staff cannot be fairly resolved because of the relationship between the head counselor and his counselor girlfriend, who coincidentally is Ms. Mitrovich's close friend. 4, another pressing issue is the librarian's demeaning attitude towards students and many teachers at CPH. Consequently, most students don't feel welcome in the library and are reluctant to ask for help. It is obvious the librarian forgets that she is there to help students and all staff, not just her favorites. By the way, she is also a close friend of the principal. An issue of concern is that quite a few older, experienced teachers have left CPH, and Ms. Mitrovich has hired friends or friends of friends without regards to the needs of the students. It appears the one qualification the principal seeks from prospective teachers is loyalty to her. 6, credit recovery sessions do not provide the required instructional hours. Instead, students sign in for attendance and are released early. Some students have complained about the shortened schedule. 7, toilets are frequently out of basic supplies. For example, toilet paper. Not only are supplies lacking, but many times only one bathroom is open at lunch for the girls. Girls have to wait in long lines and are frequently late to class. There are more issues, but not enough time. If you truly believe that students are first, then a school climate survey should be conducted at CPH with students, teachers, and parents about counseling center, library, administration, and facilities. Thank you.
Erica Di Bellohita.
Good evening, trustees. Tonight, I'd like to be a voice for adult education students and address some of the inaccuracies that are being made public as if they were facts. Number 1, we're told the cuts will avoid affecting students directly. Not so. Adult education students will be directly affected by the loss of classes. As you know, adult education students are some of the most vulnerable in our community. They need the hand up that education can offer. We're told these changes are compassionate. Not so. Adult education teachers who are single parents will lose their jobs. 30 temporary teachers, some of whom may have worked in the district for many, many years, will lose their jobs. Previous administrations kept temporary teachers from becoming permanent. Having them now lose their jobs is adding insult to injury. To fix the budget on the back of adult education teachers is not compassionate. Tough decisions need to be made, I understand that. But do it with honesty and respect for our division. When will you send an email letting teachers and students know where they stand? Transparent communication is lacking. I never thought I'd say this, but the way the Adult Education Division has been treated makes me lose all trust in this body. And what the lady said about the t-shirt, I've often thought, putting students first, putting 712 students first, that breaks my heart. Thank you.
Gina Woodard.
Good evening, Dr. Janney, school board members, district representatives. I truly appreciate, Dr. Janney, your comments. And I know this has been a difficult process for all of you. I've been a teacher in this district for the last 21 years. A taxpayer, I have a son that's a 9th grader at one of the schools in this district as well. I just wanted to comment on the district's proposed budget. For a district that emphasizes equity, the proposed budget certainly misses the mark. Cuts to busing to athletic events, after-school tutoring, special ed, AVID, classroom budgets, and healthcare workers all punish all students, but disproportionately punish those from economically challenged families, working families, and single-parent families. We claim to support A through G, college prep courses for all students, yet the CSU-UC system requires that science courses implement a 20% lab science component. My colleagues and my science budget has been slashed to zero. This year alone, I have spent over $2,600 purchasing lab supplies out of pocket to support College Board mandated labs for my AP Environmental Science course. We all know that teachers will continue offering tutoring, interventions, and will continue purchasing classroom supplies from their own pockets, even on our own dime. I'm not here to assign blame. I'm merely requesting that the board keep the priority of putting students first in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bernardo Vasquez.
Good evening, Superintendent and Board. I was at the meeting 2 weeks ago where I implored you and asked for accountability. And so I wanted to thank Dr. Janney for taking responsibility for what's happened with the budget crisis. But I also wanted to share some additional information that I'm hopeful that you know about and sure that you do. Central staff employee numbers are up 75% since 2015. Administrative staff costs are up by 41% since 2015. Enrollment has been down in the district since 2015. In April of 2015, you received a report from the state's auditor warning you of what was to come if you didn't take some drastic steps to control expenses or if revenues didn't increase. Well, we know that you can't control revenues, but you can control expenses. So what happened after this expert's report was shared with the board? There was an across-the-board salary increase of 3.75%. The Office for Equity and Culture apparently was created, which is now the largest department at the district office. Now we're in a position where we're asking to take $19 million in cuts. Well, I want to first of all thank the teachers, because teachers along with students are going to be the ones that carry the load of these cuts that are going to be coming. Cuts that are going to include special ed, curriculum, cafeteria, furlough days, in addition to some information that was just received via text, where there's going to be a shortfall for effective tomorrow. After-school homework center and library no longer offered. LCAP-funded tutoring, including morning math, tutoring in the library no longer offered. Summer school 2019 not offered. Credit recovery after school not offered. Who's taking the brunt of all that? It's the students. So the district made $18,980,000 in cuts to areas that have a direct impact on students. And before you tonight on your agenda, is going to be $20,000 in cuts to the superintendent's salary and to general counsel's salary. I think there's an imbalance there. And I would ask and hope that you do hold Ms. Janney accountable, and I appreciate her stepping up, but there have to be some consequences here. It's not fair that our students are getting cuts in services and teachers are being impacted, but a bloated central office staff maintains how things are working. Last thing I would ask is Mr. Tarantino made a great suggestion at the last board meeting for you as well to take a cut. I think it would be a fantastic gesture to the community, to the parents, to the teachers, if you in fact had some skins in the game as well. Thank you.
Nick Marinovich.
Good evening, President Hall, members of the board, Superintendent Janney. Had a little hiatus here, but I'm back. And I debated whether I was going to speak at all, but I want to first thank Superintendent Janney for her comments. No, that took a lot of time to prepare that and think about it and agonize over those very words. And the reason why I came up here, and it really, the audience as much as the new CFO, Jenny Salkeld, as the board. And it concerns something I saw in the paper the other day, and how it relates to what the board is doing. Is, the federal budget deficit went up by 17%. We got the strongest economy like forever, in my lifetime of 65 years. And that's a collective irresponsibility when you think about it. Tax cuts and a strong economy. And so what does that mean for the school district? Well, there's potential clouds ahead. You never know what's going to happen, but there's always a risk that there's some kind of economic downturn. Only this time, we're going to be in deep caca because the tools we have as an economy are limited now. You can't cut taxes much more. I mean, they're already low. The interest rates are relatively low. And so it points to the concept I want to and maybe get in your brain that there's risk in the future. We have an opportunity here with this budget situation to make some structural changes in the school district, the way we operate. Really think beyond the box, early retirement, whatever you can put through. That may be, if the bond passes, that would be your one like legacy as a board. The other one is to get this structural situation straightened out that's within the school district. Because you know as well as I, at the state level, when the economy starts downturning and capital gains go down, capital gains taxes is a huge part of the state budget picture. So that money goes to, and there's a direct relationship of all this international stuff when we translate it to the local level. And so in closing, what I wanted to do, emphasize again, that I think it's important that we do think about some of those structural changes. And just finally, and it was, when I heard your words, Dr. Janney, about the lack of internal controls that existed within certain elements of the school district. And that was like, when I read the first audit that I read when I became chair of the Bond Oversight Committee, and I didn't say it so much in the report, I read it and I go, where were the internal controls that allowed all this stuff to happen? And so there's been major improvements, but there's certainly more to follow. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Jason Lichter.
Good evening, Superintendent Janney, members of the board, staff, and members of the public. So once again, we're dealing with major cuts to adult education. Some of them will affect teachers who are the only people qualified to teach those classes, specifically culinary arts and some of the others that are offered for us. We have now one of the largest departments in the district in equity and culture, but as adult school teachers, we ask, where is the equity that involves us? Dr. Janney speaks about the we in Sweetwater family. We want to know, where's the we for adult education in the Sweetwater family? We'd like to know how family is treated this way. We talk about putting students first. again, when you eliminate 30 temporary teachers and reduce the rest of us to our guaranteed hours, you have to cut programs. There's no choice. There's no option other than to cut programs, which means we cut classes, which means that our students no longer have the opportunity to come to classes. We are hoping that the STIRS issue will be resolved. We know that an early retirement incentive is being discussed this evening, at least the proposal for it. But we have heard that it's possible that that would be offered only for people leaving in December. For those of us in the adult division, many who are intending on retiring this year, especially with the Gildan handshake or an early retirement incentive as it's more properly known, we won't be done by December. One of our members was told last week that the 2017-18 people have not been completed yet. They've been done by the district, but it's not been completed through the county or through STIRS. December is less than 2 months away. How are we going to be able to have STIRS done? And does that mean we would not be able to take advantage of the early retirement incentive, or will that also be offered in June? In terms of the cuts that have been made, there has been no consultation whatsoever with the teachers. None of us knew about this. We've heard about it through rumors. We've heard about it through our union. We've heard about it today at an adult school committee meeting, and Dr. Burke will be holding a meeting for all adult school teachers tomorrow, and we'll hear more about it. But he was very clear that he was not able to give us full information because he had not yet been given the permission to speak fully about what is going on or the cuts taking place. I don't know if that's because it's not been decided yet, or if it's just that he has not been given the authority to speak on that, but I hope that he will be if he's going to speak to us tomorrow so that we do know what's going on. December is very close. So people need to know if they're not going to be working or if their hours will be reduced, so we can plan for that, especially for the holidays. Finally, we'd like to thank you for offering to take furlough days in the administrative form, but recognize that furlough days really does not compare with people losing their jobs. Thank you.
Karen Hoffman.
Good evening, Dr. Janney and board members, and staff, parents and family, and educators behind me. I'm here on behalf of the Sweetwater Counseling and Guidance Association, and I just wanted to say that when this budget crisis, can I say, hit, you know, my first reaction was exactly what you spoke about, Dr. Janney, which is like, who did it? Let me get at them, because, you know, this is about our kids' education. This is about my membership. And, you know, we've got to do something like right now. As the meetings unfolded, as all the labor groups got together and began dealing with all the details, it became clear to me that the budget crisis wasn't a matter of somebody not looking at the checkbook, that it was something that was far more systemic, involved much greater complexity than I thought of it, because I'm familiar with smaller budgets like my own, my department. I'm just not, the vastness of the Sweetwater budget is much more complex. So then the question began to be asked about how could we all work together to do something about it. Meanwhile, my membership was still wondering, what's going on? What are we going to do? How can we prevent this from happening? Because how can we continue to provide an education, a 21st century education, that is in a safe and warm learning environment for our students? How can we go forward if we're in this budget crisis, and if it hits us now, how are we going to prevent it from hitting us, you know, next year, the following year? How can we go forward and at the same time ensure that we have the professional, supportive learning community with trainings for our staff to be able to do this? So I think that your presentation this evening answered some of our questions. It certainly touched on important points. Accountability, which I've heard before this evening, accountability is critical. Transparency is also a very important factor. I think that we need to really bring it down to details, though, and I think that right now we're suffering from communication issues. So I'm hearing from some sectors, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's being cut, this is how it's going to impact people. And I'm hearing from other parts of our district, no, it's this over here, it's that over here. And I think that right now there's a serious communication issue going on. And I think that if we're going to get through this, through working together, we need to iron out all of those problems. And I realize it's not going to happen overnight, but I think that communication is something that we need to attend to right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Maria Teresa Harris.
Good evening. This is the first time I've ever spoken to the board, and I just have a two quick comments. Number one, most important to me, it is that our students are being affected. At least at my site, they no longer have access to homework zone. I understand that at other sites, perhaps things haven't become that bad, but students are affected directly. And after hearing the ASB delegate speak of how students appreciate the extra opportunities to bring up their grades, I stress how important it is at all schools that they have access to after school or outside of school time tutoring. Second, as a teacher in this district and as an FAC member, I feel I can no longer attend SLT or book club, which I have truly enjoyed in the past few years, when I know that my colleagues in adult education and in the Learning Center face layoffs. I feel like we all need, it may just be a few dollars, but we all need to cut back in all aspects. And whether that be to freeze the programs for a couple years, because I wholeheartedly believe in them, it's something that we need to do right now to just get through these next couple years, and I hope you will reconsider both those aspects. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further speakers.
Now we'll have a formation and approval of the consent agenda. Clerk of the board, will you please read the items being pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, I have two corrections to read. On board agenda item F5, the fiscal impact is incorrect. The amount should be a savings of $9,212.50. The item will be corrected upon approval by the board. On board agenda item P1, there is a revision to the policy on page 1. The policy states that it shall apply to booster clubs, and that wording is being revised to read that it shall apply to school-connected organizations. The revision will also be made upon approval by the board. The following items have been pulled. Item F3 by Mrs. Hall. Item F8 by Mr. Segura. Item G5 by Mr. Segura. Item H2 by Mr. Tarantino. Item H3 by staff. Item K3 by Mrs. Hall and Mr. Segura. Item K4 by Mrs. Hall and Mr. Tarantino. Item M2 by the public. Item P1 by Mr. Tarantino. And item Q2 by Mrs. Hall.
Thank you. Do I have an approval for the consent, motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. I'll second.
I have a motion by Solis, a second by Pike. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
So we'll have item F8. Mr. Segura? Oh, do we have a report on LCAP? Okay. Mr. Segura?
Yes. I'm
Are
pulling
you
it up
trying
right
to
now.
get the item up on your... It's on the grant funding for the 7 through 12 programs, and the first one listed is the Department of Defense, military connected local educational agencies.
Yes, so first of all, I'm very happy that we
to receive this grant. I think it's going to be very helpful for the students or the parents who are serving in this armed services. The only question I had was on page on section C.
Can you speak up a little closer?
On section C, where it says under A, it says federal funds, it says $1 million, and it says corresponding non-federal share if applicable for $983,550, just what that is and if that's something we have to come up with or just an explanation on that.
Yes. Anna Maria? Ms. Alvarez?
Good evening, Ms. Hall, board members, Dr. Janney, members of the public. What's called as the corresponding non-federal share, which is the $983,550, is our in-kind services that we provide for positions that are currently in our budget that we would support this grant with.
Okay.
So, for example, we have resource teachers. A 0.2 of those resource teachers would act as in-kind at those 3 sites.
Okay, thank you. That explains it. And then I was really happy to see in there, give me a second if I could find out, look at the, I didn't print out the whole thing. Anywhere where they listed out the activities that are going to be happening, the robotics and stuff, and I was really happy to see the solar sprint in there, something I was able to bring over here and see that they're going to be, they have some money set aside for that, and hope to see that grow and get more students involved. That was my only question. Thank you for answering.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to follow up with that because there is an obligation of the district to have dedicated FTE in support of this. That is a fiscal impact, even though it's not a new one. If in any time we have to provide an in-kind, that's a fiscal impact. So I think that any grants, as I've said before, any grant authorization acceptance, it needs to go through finance. The CFO needs to have a review by the budget analyst to see what that impact is and to be informed of what that means so that we are well informed about what our obligations are. Because going forward, should there be a need to shift supports to our schools and it impacts those positions, we can't do it because we're obligated by this grant to have those. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, definitely.
There is no plan at this time. I don't want to create a panic for anybody thinking that we're looking at doing any changes to what's allocated to schools. That's not the case. It's just in talking in general, that's an impact, that's a choice that, so as we move around and try to understand what our budgets are and what our obligations overall are, anything we accept in a grant form does have often 99% of the time will have an impact on our other budget as well. And I think that's why the CFO needs to be informed and her staff needs to have a handle on all of that as well. So I know that we're in the middle of, we have a new CFO and we're ironing out those processes, but that is an important process that we must have in place. So thank you. And then, calling that out in the board item is in the summary or at some point, so there's a good understanding of what we're doing when we approve these grants, because sometimes that impact is not always going to be in the benefit of our students when we have an overall deficit like we do now. So is there any other questions or comments on item F8? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve item F8.
I'll make a motion to accept the grant funding for F8.
Second.
I have a motion by Segura and a second by Solis. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, so now we're on to item G5, and Mr. Segura, you pulled that one as well.
Kind of feel like Mr. Tarantino. I got 2 in a row going here.
Yeah, right. Yours are 2 in a row, though. So
That's out of respect, Mr. Tarantino.
yes.
All I wanted to mention on that was just kudos for us, the team getting involved in signing this agreement with Chula Vista Elementary School District and the Innovation Station. And I know that students at Chula will benefit from our mentoring high school students, helping them as they go through that lab. And if all the board members of the public haven't gone to the Innovation Station, it's really quite an experience. There'll be another one coming online early next year on the west side. So I just wanted to point out and congratulate the team for getting this done and putting it all together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agreement with the Chula Vista Elementary School District for the use of Innovation Station through the 2021 school year. Item G5. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Segura, a second by Solis. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
So now we have item H3. No, we have H2, pulled by Mr. Tarantino.
Yes. Madam President, I would just like to know how is site placement determined for the 2 students in terms of the memorandum of understanding between the consulate in Tijuana and our district?
Dr. Janney? Sorry.
So as soon as we locate Dr. Fulcher, I think we might be able to get the answer to that question. I just saw him walk out.
We went to get him.
Yeah, okay. You're in charge.
Just,
We can get that answer after you.
That sounds good.
Okay. So he's okay. We'll get the
It's not going to affect my vote.
Yeah.
So if you want to go ahead, Madam President, it's not going to affect my vote. I just had a question as to how the placement was determined.
We can note it and we'll have him send the information to you.
He's here.
Dr. Fulcher, we have a question for you, so run to the microphone, please. Go ahead, Mr. Tarantino.
Yeah. Dr. Fulcher, I just wanted to know, how is the site placement determined for these 2 students who are going to be paying out of district tuition, non-resident tuition?
I'm sorry,
I'm
Mr.
sorry, we're on
Tarantino.
H2?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. How is the site placement determined for these 2 students?
These are the consulate students from the consulate.
Yes, thanks. That's an excellent question. The consulate, obviously, I hope everyone can hear me. The employees do their research on our schools, and most of the time when we meet with them, they come in with a set of schools they'd like their students to attend. However, if the school is closed, we can't allow entry. So if there's an open school the employee, the student would like to consider, we talk about those schools and then make preparations for that young man or young woman to enter that program. But we don't typically, and I don't think ever, assign them to a closed site or closed school.
Okay. All right. So are they living, I don't know how consulates work. So do the employees of consulates live within the compound, or they live outside of the compound in that country in which they're serving, or out of that country? How does, I don't, and
Typically,
I kind of threw that at you, and I didn't give you an advance warning. But
that's okay. The students we work with and serve, the families typically live outside of the compound. As a matter of fact, there's a van that picks the students up each morning to bring them to school from Tijuana to here in Chula Vista.
Okay.
And Luckily, we can place them at a site that has a feeder pattern in existence. So let's say some of them attend Bonita Middle. They would likely go on, if their parents are still employees of the consulate, to Bonita High. And that also minimizes the amount of travel the consulate employees need to do as well.
Okay, so they do live in the country in which
Yes.
they're serving in the consulate?
They do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fulcher. That's all, Madam President.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve item H2.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Pike, a second by Solis. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
So now we're on to item H3, which is pulled by staff.
We have a presentation from Dr. Fulcher.
All right, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. And joining me tonight, I have a Southwest High teacher, Miss Melody Brown, and also my equity office colleague, Miss Lauren McClellan.
Just 'cause
Okay. I always have trouble with this thing, and I have it the right way this time.
And make sure you, can I just say something really quick? Apparently, people are having a hard time hearing, so if you would move forward in the seats, you might get away from that the refrigerators that are running in the background, and that might help. We'll try to speak into the microphone as best we can, but there's no guarantees, because everybody's voice is a little different, so please be sure you speak into the mic.
It's probably better if I don't speak in the mic and just use my outside voice, but we'll go forward. We have two things that we'll be focusing on today, and that's culture and climate. We're going to start by providing a brief overview of our efforts to build a culture of equity across the district, and then we're going to describe some of the work we're doing with both our adults and our students. I also want to take a look at how we are helping to promote a culture of excellence throughout the district. Please recall that goal 2 is to create a safe and healthy learning environment for each student by building a culture of equity and a positive climate that promotes excellence throughout the district. The little girl pictured in this slide is Ruby Bridges, and some of you may know the story of Ruby Bridges. And we thought that using that as a backdrop to some of the work we do across our equity department would be helpful. She was 6 years old when this picture was taken, and she was the first African-American child to integrate a white Southern school. And she did this in 1960. She was escorted to class every day by 4 U.S. Marshals and her mother. 2 would walk in front, 2 in the back. She was also the subject of a Norman Rockwell painting that a lot of you may have seen. It was on the Cosby Show and a lot of other places as well. She was selected to attend this all-white school based on a test some African-American students were chosen to take. She was one of 6 students during that year who qualified to now attend an integrated school or to integrate a school. It was hoped, however, because of the difficulty level of the test, that no African-American students would pass, and thereby increasing the length of segregated sites and schools across the country. So she was one of 6 students who did indeed pass, and she was ostracized, as many of you know, and confronted with blatant racism in full view of her federal escorts. People in the mob that she had to pass through day after day after day would threaten to poison her so she couldn't eat the food at school. And this little 6-year-old was also shown black dolls that were encased in wooden coffins. Now, that's a lot for any 6-year-old or any student to have to deal with. But she continued showing up day after day going to school. And the majority of the white parents in that school pulled their kids out of school because they didn't want Ruby to be around their children. She couldn't eat, she didn't have anyone to hang around, but she did have one teacher out of the 20 or so that were at that school who said, I will work with this child. This is a child who didn't feel welcome. This is a child who didn't feel she belonged. This is a child who couldn't take advantage of the education system until one teacher changed that in the school. That is the power of education, and that is what this office and this program and this district is all about. When we look at equality, which is what this is all about in this story, in this Ruby Bridges story, we've had a number of conversations that have been pretty easy to engage in around equality. We've talked about facilities, we've talked about buildings, we've talked about making sure we have equal access, but we haven't talked about equity a whole lot. And that's where the new argument in education is. It's around equity. Equality, we've tackled and talked a great deal about. But in spite of her being sent to an equal school, and in spite of some of her peers going to equal school, we still have student groups who don't succeed. Some of them are African American, some of them are learning English as a second language, some of them may be members of our LGBTQ community. So we have to do a better job dealing with issues around equity so that students like Ruby and students like the one we serve in our district have a place to show up every day that's safe, where they feel they belong, and where they can receive an education that's comparable to every student in this nation. That's why we do the work we do, and I'm happy to say that we have a number of people who have developed services and supports to work with our young people. And just so you know, this work can't be done alone. I want to emphasize some of the different people and groups who have helped out and developed a lot of these interventions that you see before you. They're hard to read. When you look at the Equity, Culture, and Support Services Office, I want all of you to know that it includes a number of offices that have been around for quite some time. We have adult education, we have athletics, we have student services, we have special ed or special services, we have alternative education, we have adult education, we have our homeless and foster youth, we have our safety and security office, we have Palomar High School, Options Secondary School, Alta Vista Academy, and the only new department, we have one new department that we added a few years ago that's paid for out of county monies, is our Mental Health Resource Center. So that's our Equity, Culture, and Support Services Office. And those are the folks who came together and helped create the kind of services and interventions that you see listed in front of you. We've developed supports for our students like teen court, peer mediation that's been provided. You heard Mr. Zumstein talk about restorative discipline. Well, we've done a lot of that with the schools throughout this district. We've had bullying prevention established and put in place. We've participated in equity walks. We've developed a number of supports and services for our LGBTQ youth. We provide mediation services. Not me, but all those departments that I mentioned just a few seconds ago. Suicide prevention training and supports have been offered across this district. We're offering academic and social-emotional services to our foster and homeless youth. Trauma-informed care is being provided. We're also providing alternative dispute resolutions for our families who have students with disabilities. So there are a number of things that we're proud of, that we're doing. And the reason I'll never apologize for those services is because of people like Ruby Bridges, who demanded not just equality, but equity. So we're here to talk a little bit more about what we're doing around our culture and climate in the district, specifically about some of the services that we provide the adults that we work with. And this quote is critical because we know we can't change a system without transforming the culture. So we want to talk a little bit about that. And here to kick off that conversation, first part of the conversation is a colleague I referenced from my office, Mrs. Lauren McClellan.
Hello. How are you? I just want to say that I'm extraordinarily proud and lucky that I get to work in this department. So one of my jobs is that I work with sites that are forming culture and climate committees. And it sounds kind of like another committee, but this is a different group of people. These folks are all trained in restorative practice. There's at least an administrator on the committee. There's usually their CIS coordinator on the committee, an attendance person on the committee, and of course anyone who wants to join is welcome. And these are folks that you don't always find on FAC, but they want to have a voice in what's going on at their site. So one of the first things that we talk about is what's the difference between culture and climate, because they sound really similar. But when we look at the definition, they're very different. So culture is about unwritten rules, expectations, sets of beliefs, these things that develop over time. I like to talk about, if you remember the very first time you started a new job and you worked with people who had been there for years and years. There was a lot that they would do and say that you as a new person didn't understand. And they did things a certain way and it seemed to be understood by folks. And as a new person, you kind of had to acclimate and figure out what was going on and what's the way that we do things here and why do we do that. And so that's culture. Culture really has to be examined and it takes time to figure out what it is. It's a way of thinking in an organization. Climate is more like vibe. Climate is what's the feeling, what's the sense of the people working in a place. And climate can change. It's usually shifted around by culture, but climate can also change kind of dramatically when there are changes. So for example, there might be a change in leadership that shifts climate pretty dramatically. But climate is a state of mind, it's a feeling. So I show folks this picture to try and help understand the difference between climate and culture. Culture is embedded. Culture is over time. Culture has to be examined closely because it's not apparent on first glance. It's under the ground. Climate you can see and feel, and so it's a little bit more obvious. You can figure out a climate pretty quickly. So when a site starts to examine their culture and climate, I encourage them to go through a little process, and we call that what's happening at your school. And so they have little cards that I give them, and these little cards have things like the kind of language that you hear people using at a school. Does it sound friendly and warm and welcoming? Are LGBTQ students supported? To what extent is there an awareness of equity issues? And so as they're having this conversation, they're thinking about, as they look at a card, do we do this thing well? And then they kind of make a quick decision based on, some anecdotal evidence, and they say, we do this well. They might look at something and say, well, we do this, but it needs some nourishing. We need to work on this a little bit. And then they might say, we don't do this yet. And so they categorize these ideas in 3 different sections. And then I encourage them to start with what they do well. And I encourage them to go and examine their school and find some evidence, find some data to support that, yes, we do this well, and then to share it with the whole site and really celebrate it. Because we all have areas of growth, but it's much more motivating to work on your areas of growth when you feel good about the things that you're doing well. We've shared this with you before. This is the fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices. And it's this idea that people are happier and more productive when people in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. And so we talk about how do we get into the with? How do we do things with people? I've been working with some culture and climate committees, sharing with them this idea of fair process as a way of doing things with people. When we engage in fair process, people are more likely to feel trust. They're more likely to cooperate, even when they don't get exactly what they want or the decision that they think ought to be made wasn't the one that was made. They still can go along because the process to arrive at the decision was fair. The first component of fair process is to have an engagement phase. An engagement phase where you seek input from stakeholders. And that could happen in small group conversation, that can happen in survey, that can happen any number of ways. The important thing is to think about, to get the kind of information that you want, what's the most effective way to engage? The second piece is explanation. If I am going to make a decision and I'm going to engage my stakeholders in a conversation about what they think that decision ought to be, once I receive their input, I need to share with them, here's what I heard you say. These were the comments that you made. These were the suggestions that were offered. And I need to share it with them as evidence that I really did hear. I really did listen. I really did consider. And the more specific I am with that evidence, the better. And then I need to say, I heard all of this, and here's what I thought about, and here's the decision I made. And I made it this way because of XYZ reasons. And I didn't make this decision because of XYZ reasons. The third component often gets skipped in this process. The first two seem pretty commonsensical, if that's a word, that you engage and then you explain why you made a decision. This expectation clarity piece is, now that there's this new decision, this way that we're going to do things, here are what the expectations are going forward. Here are the new rules of the game. And explained in such a way that people are less likely to kind of jockey for favoritism. Yeah, everybody has to do that but me, right? And less likely to say, well, I don't know, is this really the expectation going forward or not, right? So to be very clear in what the new rules are. We really like this rubric in our department because it helps people identify the extent to which they agree or disagree with some clarity. It's one thing to say, I agree. It's another thing to say, I enthusiastically agree, or I have some reservations, but I'm going to work on those myself. This disagreement distinction, I think, is also really important because there's a disagreement that says, I have some serious concerns, but I'm willing to move forward. And then there's a disagreement that says, I object to this because it goes against particular beliefs and values that I have, or I think this is going to be detrimental. And so it's really important to know where a person lands in this agreement rubric. And if I'm the leader and I have some folks that disagree, we're going to move forward, but I'm going to continuously check in on those folks who disagreed and see how they're doing and see if they have some needs or some thoughts, some feedback as we go forward. And so this cannot be an anonymous process. If it's anonymous, then I don't know who agreed and who disagreed, and I can't work on anybody's concerns. And so as I work with these culture and climate committees, they really enjoy this because it helps them understand where everyone is. I have some culture and climate committees that are working on some challenging issues. They're examining implicit bias, especially as it appears in their dress code. And that's a really uncomfortable conversation. It's an important and a brave conversation, but without some way to negotiate that so that it remains professional and no one gets hurt and everyone's voice is heard, it's important to have this type of a process. The work that we do is really interesting because it's knowledge work. We're not in a factory producing widgets. Our work is all based in knowledge. And in order for us to feel good about sharing and exchanging knowledge, we have to use fair process because it will build trust that makes us want to share and exchange knowledge. Finally, this is a set of agreements that we enter into at the beginning of any committee meeting, because we know that there's the potential for a tremendous growth, examination, analysis. There's also the potential for, if you look at the last bullet, it says, we expect it to be messy at times. And every time I present this to adults, they really highlight that last bullet, because a lot of us are extraordinarily uncomfortable with conflict. That has a lot to do with how we were raised, that conflict is not a good thing. But in fact, we know that conflict is a very natural, normal process in human communication. The importance is, how do we manage it? How do we deal with it? Can we disagree and still be respectful and want the best for each other and our systems? And so this is a great tool that we use to really build some understanding of, we're in this together, we're working together, we acknowledge and appreciate each other, and we know it's going to get messy, and that's okay. In order for all of this to go really well, in terms of adults working together and making some really important decisions and having challenging conversations, it's important that we foster wellness in our adults. So with that said, our next presenter is Melody Brown from Southwest High.
Evening, President Hall, Dr. Gianni, board members. I'm delighted to be here today. It's my first time speaking to the board and the public, so thank you for having me. I am here to represent the resource teacher specialist for restorative practices. We are in place to help renew our culture and climate on sites. And so the work that we're doing is centering around teacher wellness as a way to foster student wellness. So that's where I come in. And my story just begins with the normal thing. During my 6th year of school, I had the perfect storm of personal issues, family things, and student issues, behavior, it was just the perfect storm, and so I felt defeated, debilitated, and what actually helped heal that situation, though, was speaking out. So I reached out to my colleagues. I was very, very lucky to have some good people around. And the self-awareness, restorative coaching for myself, I sought that out on a personal basis, and taking action toward meeting my needs as a classroom teacher was basically what saved me and allowed me to believe in the profession again. So now it gave me some fire in order to reach out to my colleagues, because I have such admiration for the teachers that I had as students. As a student, as a Chula Vista High School alumnus who was part of the VAPA program, my teachers gave me a voice when I didn't feel I had one at home, and I grew into this profession with profound respect for who teachers were and what they do on a daily basis. But as we know, teachers burn the candle at both ends. So in order for me to restore myself, I had to create some soft boundaries. And of course, my mission is still the same. I want to change student lives. So it's not a selfish boundary that we're encouraging for teachers, but it's simply taking care of ourselves so that we can do the work we're so passionate about. So, and in doing so, I even realized as I spoke my needs to my classroom students, they were mirroring my needs. We all needed the same thing because we're all humans. So the same things: kindness, peace, a sense of safety, structure, organization, low-stress classroom rapport, keeping it lighthearted, keeping it easy, and most of all, making it feel safe for everyone to express themselves. So what I was doing a couple of years ago after I had my own issues is I formed a voluntary teacher self-care group, and I invited my colleagues into my classroom for conversation, to commiserate, but most of all, in order to instill hope in each other again. So for 2 years, we've been doing this off and on, and honestly, a lot of teachers don't want to leave their room at lunch because they're working and they have students in there. So it has been a challenge for them to give themselves permission to take a break. So this year, though, it's been a real blessing, and it's very exciting. I've been given a .2 status as a restorative practice teacher resource, and we are rebuilding our culture through transparency again. So important on so many levels. But if I noticed if I don't share, my fellow teachers don't feel safe to share either. And we have a few things in practice. We have our lunch times. We also have a coaching cycle set up with my assistant principal, Erin Magnan, helped me develop something. In coaching in my personal life, I sought out to become a wellness coach also, so I'm bringing those tools into the classroom in a trusted structural fashion, and here's some of the things that we're doing. I'm showing teachers what I did for myself in setting boundaries and implementing restorative practices and culture shift into our daily classroom routines and protocols, because it's quite possible to continue to take care of yourself during the school day. Honoring teacher and student wellness, making sure that we're all on the same playing field. Mindfulness practices, slowing down. Social emotional lens, that has been fostering a great deal of self-awareness, the emotional intelligence component, so students can identify when they need some extra support. So we're encouraging them to speak up and advocate for themselves, as well as for teachers, for that matter. We're fostering a culture of resilience and grit, and showing them how to move forward through the challenges. We're not sidestepping them, but we're empowering students and teachers. So all of this, I keep mentioning students and teachers. There's very much a student protocol embedded in taking care of ourselves as teachers. So that's part of our conversation. And the restorative coaching, this is what I'm doing with some fellow staff members presently. We are focusing on finding joy in teaching again, because I'm entering under the premise that we all came into the profession for a reason, because it was a calling, not a job. So in order to speak to that, we're focused on bringing joy back into the classroom. And when the teachers are happy, the kids are actually enjoying the curriculum. So we're sharing best practices for pain points. If teachers are suffering, dealing with behavior or the grading workload, or implementing some smart technologies, some things that would be useful for their time, we're encouraging each other and teaching that. Recovering a sense of purpose in the classroom. I've been lucky to be able to talk to my colleagues about that, finding value, finding their purpose again in the class, because that is our deep well of energy. So if we can take care of ourselves enough to keep that focus in mind, we can do anything. As well as highlighting teachers' own character and personality strengths. So the coaching is very specific to each teacher, and it highlights what they already do well, so that they actually feel like they have agency and efficacy with their own students. They know what they're doing, but the minutia gets in the way sometimes. So here are a few quotes that I have from teachers that have worked with me this year through this Point 2 restorative practice teacher specialist position. And it's a beta testing, so this is our part of our qualitative research. First quote, "The process was great. I found it very helpful to be able to come up with individual strategies for specific things helpful to my particular classroom and set of students." So teacher, student-centered. "I've applied some of the techniques and strategies already, creating a positive classroom environment, checking in with students to connect with them, see how their day's going, checking in with myself to see how I'm doing, working through and finding positive solutions when things turn upside down in the classroom." So it's very much real-life based. Another teacher said, "I shifted, I grew, and I learned about my own limits and boundaries. If I shift in a positive way, then my students will hopefully shift along with me." So creating a healthier classroom. And lastly, yes, I would recommend this process. Some may be hesitant to open their classrooms and may feel guarded. However, it is done in a respectful manner, and really it is for the benefit of all. So I'm very proud of what we already have going at Southwest High School. And investing in teachers, we don't need a whole lot, but we just need some structural support, because we're already there for the right reasons. So it's very exciting work going on at Southwest High, and I feel very privileged to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap this up, and I want to thank my colleagues for presenting that information. It truly does require a number of people, a village, as they say, to support our students. And it's important to remember that when our country has been divided, polarized, and is in some type of conflict, society has always relied on schools and educators to make a difference and to kind of right some of those wrongs, whether it be racism, sexism, violence, conflicts. It's always happened at the schools, and the work we're doing across our district is no different. We need to make sure we have staff who are equipped to handle a lot of the issues that, of course, we're seeing and dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I just wanted to remind the board, as we kind of look at this new way of operating, this new culture, if you will, that different questions, again, need to be asked. We're not interested in the rule and the law and the policy that was broken. When we're dealing with our students and dealing with some conflict, we want to know what was the harm, what harm was done. Not who broke that rule, who are we going to point the finger at, but how can we repair the harm that took place? What can we do to repair it? And not what are the consequences. Are they going to lose their job? Are they going to be suspended forever? But who's responsible for the repair? How can we come together as a district to repair some of the harm that people feel, both adults and students? And I know you've heard this statement a number of times. You can tell a lot about an organization by how it treats its most vulnerable. Well, Ruby Bridges wasn't treated well by our school system, but we have a number of students who are treated well. Our education system has evolved. You can also tell a lot about how an organization responds in a crisis. We are still answering that question. So what are we going to be? Are we going to be a system that's evolving to the heights that I know we can achieve, or one that's still mired in the Ruby Bridge era and mentality? So I'm going to stop there and thank you for your attention. You know, we get a little passionate about this at times, and again, I'm not going to apologize for that. But if you have any questions, my team and I are certainly available to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Fulcher. Mr. Segura.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Fulcher, I really respect and appreciate the way you led off and closed your presentation. I firmly believe that the work your Department of Equity, Culture, and Student Supports is doing is needed, especially with the failures at the federal level and the attacks on the most vulnerable, which mostly are our students who are there, who are in that target. So I really support the program you have, the teams working on, and the creation of this department through Dr. Janney. It's needed now and forever, and it's only gonna make our students not only better students in the classroom, but better people and human beings. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate Melanie and Lauren, your presentation, part of it, the presentation as well, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segura. Any other questions? Mr. Tarantino.
Yes. Dr. Fulcher, I'd like to thank you for outlining how your department works and how your department has created the umbrella under which there were a lot of independent departments and services that are now aligned under your department. And so that was, I think, very helpful, especially in light of some of the comments that were made this evening under public comments. The visuals that you presented in your topics were excellent. How you described culture versus climate, Lauren, is excellent. That tree speaks volumes. It absolutely does. And Melanie, the way that you're working with your teachers and the way that you're providing a safe place for them, because sometimes we forget that teachers are people too. I know if you talk to kids, we don't eat, we don't go to the bathroom, we don't sleep, but we do have needs just like everybody else. And for you to take that risk, and for your colleagues to take that risk, says a lot, not only about you, but also the climate and the culture that you're working on at Southwest High. So kudos to you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Anyone else? Dr. Fulcher, I just want to say to your team and to the team that isn't present here tonight that we do have, that is part of our vision as a board. That is an important, a large important part of where we're moving as a district and what we feel is important as a district. This board knows that changing lives starts with making people feel valued and safe and addressing the needs before they ever hit a door of a classroom. The needs of a student must be met and must be, staff, I'm glad. Thank you both for your presentation as well. Without this, we can't be a nation of hope. We must be a nation of hope. Thank you. All right. So now we'll move on to item K3. And it was pulled by myself and Mr. Segura. So Mr. Segura, you go ahead, please. This is the school-connected organizations.
Right, so my comments were just around, I really liked all the information that was provided in the document, the bylaws, the insurance, all the information that it's in there. I know that's what we're shooting for going forward, but I just really appreciate that being all in order. Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of get a general explanation on the item. The one in the attachment that talks about booster scheduled fundraisers, and when they talk about like spring VAPA, spring, the functions of some of those things and how that interacts with what maybe ASB or staff or student clubs do and how that is managed. Anna Maria? Ms. Alvarez? Sorry. I understand that. So how does that coincide and how does that not take away, one doesn't take away from the other? How do we?
Could you repeat the first part of the question? Right. I apologize.
In the Booster Club attachments, there's a booster scheduled fundraisers listing different fundraisers, and some of them are off-site, but some of them are things like concessions for varsity home games, color guard show, spring formal dance, spring VAPA. So how does that not conflict with maybe an ASB or a school club, student club function, or fundraising
So all of these events have to be coordinated through the ASB prior to approval. And so the ASB keeps a calendar of events, a calendar of fundraising activities so that they do not conflict.
So if they're both, if everybody's at the game fundraising, how does that not?
So
are there parameters around how that works?
So at most sites, what they do is they do a division of sales, and there's a couple of options. I'm not sure in this particular situation, but they either have sales that are compartmentalized, meaning some people sell, the popcorn, some people sell the drinks, or they identify a particular week where each of the booster organizations is fundraising.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll take a motion to approve item K3.
Madam President, I did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Solis.
With regard to this letter that we received from...
Yes, we received a little memo from the Booster Club. Go ahead. Do you want Dr. Janney to address that?
Yes,
all right,
please.
Dr. Janney, please.
So the information that was posted on the district's website was missing that one document. The other document was dated September 26th, and that was acknowledging that they have a year to change their name, so that it doesn't have Olympian High School. And this document says they have a year to change their logo so that it's not the school logo. That's part of our new requirements for school-connected organizations. They can say Olympian, they could say Olympian Eagle Band Boosters, or they could say Eagle Boosters or Olympian Boosters. They just can't say Olympian High School and they can't use the same logo. So those two, this is an addition that wasn't included in the original board documents that we wanted to make sure you knew.
So they use a logo that has the mascot from Olympian and maybe a strong man underneath it, lifting it up like they were boosting it, or make their own design? Or can they not have anything that has any kind of connection to, have we defined that?
I'm not sure. So
It
this
just has to be
yeah.
distinct,
Yeah.
distinctly different.
Yes.
So if there was okay. Just to throw out an idea there for boosters. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve item K3.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Solis, second by Segura. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item K4, Mr. Tarantino, you pulled this item? Right? Okay.
Yes, Madam President, I did. I'm sure that we've all received calls about, what, if in fact there is going to be early retirement incentive, what the plan is going to look like. And there's two questions that I've been asked, and I'd like an answer to. First of all, in the last early retirement incentive, there was service credit that was offered. In fact, it was 75% of your salary or 2 years of service credit. So the question that I've been asked is, and I know that we don't have the specifics, but given the fact that we're working through PARS, would there be available a service credit to employees if that was something that was deemed feasible for us?
Ms. Salkeld? Dr. Salkeld?
So in terms of the PARS agreement that's before you, that particular plan does not have the service credit because that reflects the changes with what's called PEPRA, the Post-Employment or the Pension Reform Act. And so that, because it's a private entity putting this information together in this type of plan, the service credit's not permitted. However, I've also reached out to CalSTRS. CalSTRS does have also a plan that does have a 2-year service credit, so that might be another option for us to explore. But
Okay.
the PARS specifically does not, in accordance with those PEPRA changes in 2013.
Okay. And the second question that I've been asked is the payment, whatever the percentage of salary that's determined would be feasible for us, is that paid in a lump sum or is it paid over staggered payments over, say, 5 years?
So that's something we're going to be reviewing with the PARS consultant. Typically, in most cases, it's an annuity, like a 5-year payment based on a certain percentage of someone's salary. And those are assumptions that we're going to be factored into our analysis to see if it's feasible based on what amounts and variables.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Hall.
Thank you. So I'm going to withdraw my question at this time because I think it's premature. So thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve item K4.
So moved.
Who is that?
Second. No, Mr. Segura.
Was that Mr. Segura?
Segura Solis.
Okay, right. I have a motion by Segura, a second by Solis. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Your voice changed, Mr. Segura, on that one. Okay, so that was K4. We're on to M. Let's have the CBOC report, please.
Good evening again, President Hall. Is that better? Oh, okay. Good evening, President Hall, members of the board, Superintendent Janney. I'll make my report brief. As well as the Bond Oversight Committee, I think we had one of our least long meetings, shortest meetings. Quickly, first of all, the school was well kept, modern as schools go at Rancho Del Rey. And a special note, the principal was very complimentary of Ron Malone and his maintenance staff, and that's welcome news to the Bond Oversight Committee. I'll get to the main one at the end. We did look at some process improvements with the Bond Oversight Committee, but the level of activity in terms of the bond program itself has, this is a weird mic, has slowed down considerably. But the item I wanted to bring to your attention on behalf of the Bond Oversight Committee is, and I don't relish as the chair bringing that item to your attention, but several members, Member Sides and Member Curieto, have been watchdogs over the settlement funds that were, there were 2 lawsuits that you've been familiar with, of course. And the issue here is, and I'll try to make this as simple as possible, and it's not pointing fingers or anything like that, but due diligence says that our committee has concerns over the use of the settlement funds that you transferred from the Special Project Reserve Fund back on September 24th to the general fund to assist in the budget balancing efforts, along with the other ones that you did about a month ago. Those settlement funds were, again, originally came from litigation that the district won, and there were one you lost, you won. There was a net positive to the district. The issue is the original money, the original project funds that were spent either on Gilbane SGI or the HAR project were bond funds. The litigation was related to the bond program in effect. And therefore the question is it legal, given that the original project was funded through bond proceeds or the consultant expenditures, is it legal to spend that money, in effect, the settlement money, on operating expenses used to balance the general fund? And we're not trying to find ways that make matters worse, but from an accounting and legal perspective, the committee felt that if there was a legal opinion that it was okay to do that, that the CBOC, and in effect the public, should have such information, and that if there was not a legal opinion that it was okay to do that there should be one. And it's just to point out a concern that we have that such an opinion be done. In closing, we will probably not be meeting in November, so by the time we meet in December, because of the schedules and the holidays and everything, the timing wasn't right, we'll know whether the DD passed, and then we'll discuss that. But the settlement funds is an issue. It's something that was of mutual concern to 3 members, and then we discussed it as a committee and recommended that. So thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any questions?
Right. No. Nobody has questions.
No.
Thank you. All right. Item M1, right?
M2?
I'm sorry, M2.
I have one speaker, Kathleen Shears.
Thank you.
I am not understanding this. If you turn to page 8 of 8, it says that they're asking you to ratify. That's not a good word, ratify. That means it's already been done. An amendment to reduce the scope of work, which includes removing the new building, $650. So if you're removing the new building from the scope of work, why are you increasing the cost by close to $88,000? That is, I don't understand that, and we are concerned about this.
Thank you.
We meaning the community. Thank you.
No further speakers?
Any questions from the board? Did you want to address that question, Mr.?
Sure, I'll ask Doug. Dr. Aguirre, through the chair, if you could address that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino and Ms. Chair. So in essence, this clarification, I think, is in order. So this is not necessarily ratification. We're bringing it forward with that terminology. We have not acted on it. So that's the first part of the concern. The second issue is with the de-scoping of this particular structure that would be built in. Now that we're going to be de-scoping, we're going to need to come in and look at where all the connections happen to the existing buildings. So it's a different approach. And so if you notice, there's support from an engineering firm, different architects. So now it's going to look a little bit different. And this was done after a more thorough review of the enrollment at the campus. Happens to be this campus. So again, after going through and reviewing the enrollment, it really didn't call for an additional structure. Rather, what it called for is a deep modernization, which is what we're working on. In addition, we are also going to be looking at potentially touching the 700 building. So there's a couple of pieces that are significantly different, and that's why we need to engage with the service, which would then need to be resubmitted to the Division of the State Architect.
Thank you.
So am I understanding you that it's a couple of buildings that would be modernized with a deep modernization rather than demolishing them and building a whole new building?
Correct. The current plan would call for a new structure that would include 2 classroom spaces. After looking at analysis of square footage available for instruction, the reality is that given the enrollment, there's not really a need for an additional structure. Rather, to have a more targeted use of resources, what makes more sense to do deep modernization at 600 building, and we're going to explore the 700 building as well. So that is correct.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? No? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve item M2.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Segura, a second by Pike. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
We now have item P1, and Mr. Tarantino, you've pulled this item on school-sponsored trips.
Yes, Madam President. I had a question about on BP 6153B on the top, the top paragraph. I was not aware that we pay for chaperones. I thought chaperones paid their own way. For example, under item G4, we have 3 field trips. Bonita Vista High School is going to New York City, and there's 10 chaperones. Hilltop High School is going to Montebelluna, Italy, and there's 1 chaperone. And Sweetwater High School is going to Northern California to visit universities, and there's 3 chaperones. So I was under the impression that chaperones pay their own way, but this says we pay for them. Is that, am I mixing apples with oranges, okay, or am I apples to apples, or?
Dr. Carberry?
Somehow in my mind it came to mixed metaphors, but nevertheless.
We're going to make a smoothie, right?
Right. In this particular case, in some cases, again, dependent upon whether it's a club, organization, those kinds of things, the chaperones often will pay their own way. So the chaperones going with the school to Italy, that's just the classroom teacher. And as a result, because it's a group of students and that's the class going, we do cover the cost of the teacher, because to go on a field trip, there has to be a certificated staff member with them.
Absolutely.
Right? In some cases, again, a club, other kinds of things, they wouldn't be able to go if there wasn't an adult. So in many cases, the adults are participating in the fundraising as well.
Okay.
So the costs go into the big pot, and they look at what's the cost for everybody to go, and they assure that they have sufficient funds to go.
If people wanted to tag along, then they would be responsible for paying their own way. So say, for example, I wanted to
Are you talking about yourself? No,
I wanted, So say, for example, I wanted to go to Bellaluna, Italy, then I would be responsible for paying my own way. The
Correct.
district would not pay that
Correct.
for me, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
all.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve item P1.
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Solis, a second by Pike. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. I have item Q2 was pulled by me, and it's a resolution designated December 1st as World AIDS Day, and I don't think we're really making it World AIDS Day. We're joining in on the recognition of World AIDS Day, but I think it's important that we educate our students about the effects of AIDS, how it's, all about it. I learned recently about I don't know if it's actually a vaccine or it's something that helps prevent people from spreading it or from the infection to being spread from one person to another. So, and people to survive with the disease. So I think it's important that we educate staff and students and whoever needs it, but also recognize that the battle is ongoing with this epidemic. It's still, I think it's been hidden in the conversations for many years because people, maybe because I just remember the days when people were dying. I mean, just tremendous numbers of people were succumbing to this disease, and it's important that we remember not only them, but how to continue the battle to find ways to survive and prevent the spread. So I'm glad we're doing this recognition. That's all I had to say about that. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve item Q3. Q2.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Solis, a second by Segura. Would you call for the vote, please?
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, now we have item F3 and board comment. So I pulled item F3. Did anybody? Nobody else did, right? So I pulled item F3 because I feel that we need to have a couple of board workshops. It's very important that we have full knowledge of not only what we have in our structure as far as positions and programs and budgets, and be fully aware of the full encompassing workshop on the details behind all of that, district-wide. And between now and I'd say mid-February, because those important details are necessary for us to really have a understanding of, but also a presentation or workshop on where we are moving with our systems and structures and the double checks across this district. I mean, that has to be the focus of where we move forward and move this district forward. I know in the audit subcommittee we have looked at recommendations to bring in school services to do the review. We did a recommendation for a focused audit on the systems, and part of that information is now being has come before us, and we know that there's a definite, we need to require that. We understand that as a board, and to have timelines for when the milestones of where, as we move forward, what those milestones are and what our expectations are to meet those implementation of the structures that are needed in this district. So I would like to make sure that we have those workshops on our schedule. And I would, I know with our board self-evaluation coming up, and I've already talked to Dr. Janney about this, that we work as a board through setting priorities for, that we bring our focus in, not just from the LCAP, but as board members, where our priorities are on what we, now what we've learned over the last 4 years and how we set the priorities for the district in our policies and in our vision. So that being said, I know Dr. Jenny's already working on how that workshop will look for us in January as we do our board evaluation. So that's what I wanted to say about F3. And now we'll go to a board comment, and we'll start with Mr. Tarantino. Please.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Janney for her comments tonight. I think it went a long way in terms of answering the questions that I think we're all getting in terms of how did it happen, why did it happen, and all of that. And I'm glad that we're not scapegoating and assigning blame. There were a lot of factors that were involved, and so I thank you for your comments. Kind of in tandem with that, I'm just amazed at the amount of misinformation that's out in the public in terms of the cuts and how programs and students are being impacted, and I don't know that a lot of them are true, and I don't know where they're coming from, but I don't know exactly what to do about it, but I'm sure that we're all accosted by a number of cuts that haven't even been discussed with us. So I don't know. I just it's troublesome, and I don't know what to do about it. I just thought I'd say that there's an awful lot of misinformation out there among the public. I'd like to thank Mr. Hines for spending time out of his very busy schedule to educate me in terms of football and how the league is determined, and the fact that I raised the issue that the scores are lopsided, and I had a concern about the safety of students after a score is 56 to 7, and students are still out there playing. Well, he informed me that there are checks and balances. There are things that are called mercy rules that I had no clue what that was. And apparently after the third quarter, the fourth quarter, you could either the coach of one team or the other team or the ref can recommend that the clock just runs. There's no timeouts, and that's kind of a safety feature for the students that are playing, and I didn't know that. He also acquainted me with the 6 pillars of character, which every player and every parent gets. And some of those, well, the 6 pillars are trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and good citizenship. So the long and short of it is I feel much better after spending the time with him. I appreciate the fact that he literally took my hand and walked me through it, because you all know that I'm athletically challenged, but I got the message, and I really appreciate that. I want to congratulate Ms. Kramer, the principal of Bonita Vista Middle, and the staff for putting together a great 50th anniversary celebration, which was held last Saturday. I think everybody who was there had a good time. There were food booths, there was dancing, there was DJs. Of course, the cheerleaders were there. I didn't know that Bonita Middle had cheerleaders, but they do. And so it was good. It was a good activity, and again, congratulations for that recognition in terms of 50 years. Thanks to Dr. Glover and his team for putting together the tenure reception, the permanent status reception. Again, I think it's something special that we do as a district. And the people who attend, they bring their families, their kids, their parents, and it's really a nice ceremony. And thanks to our CSEA and SCGA for providing the the refreshments afterwards, after the ceremony. And last of all, I'd like to thank the Eastlake Foundation for their donation of $20,000 to Eastlake High and Eastlake Middle for STEAM education for the 2018-19 school year. Each year, this foundation works with the principal and teachers of those schools, really all of the schools that were within the Eastlake community, to determine the best and highest use of the donated funds. I think it's notable to say that since 1955, they have donated over $2 million to the 6 Eastlake schools. $2 million. 1995, sorry, no. Eastlake was not even created in 55. No, 1995. I don't know where the 55 came from. I have no clue. Anyway, over $2 million. And congratulations to our own Elaine Elefante Leano, who is the director of College and Career Readiness, who is the newest board member on the Eastlake Foundation board. And that's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you. And Mr. Tarantino, swimming is an athletic sport, you know. So.
Yeah, but it's
and
not
surfing is too, at least in Mar Vista.
It's not a team sport, though.
Swimming is, and so is surfing. So, shall we go to Mr. Solis?
Sure. Thank you, President Hall. A couple things. Just wanted to thank the coaches, the teachers, parents, and students that came up to me and felt comfortable talking to me about the budget. I appreciate that. I appreciated that very much, and they had a lot of good concerns, and a lot of them were talked about today. Also, tomorrow's our legislative ad hoc committee meeting at 4:30, the district, so everybody's welcome to come. And also at the Camacho Gym at Las Palmas Park from October 29th through November 2nd from 8 to 3. The one-site eye clinic will be there, so if anybody in the district is available, any kids need to check their eyesight, the address is 1810 East 22nd Street, National City, California, 91950. And if you want to walk in at 8 a.m., please be there by 8 a.m. If you want get an appointment, you can call Evelyn at the National School District, and that's 619-336-7703. So come out for some free glasses. Thank you.
Mr. Segura?
Yes, just a couple things. I actually went to Castle Park High volleyball game. Saw my daughter play. She was away game at San Diego High, which is the first time I've ever been on that campus. Old campus, so it reminded me of a number of our campuses, but well kept up as well. And I was glad to be able to go see her play and the varsity team play as well. I know on the calendar I have the look forward to meeting Dr. Della Torre at the reception at Southwestern College, which is on the 29th, which my union and the signatory concerts are sponsors of. Proud of that. And then the Southwestern College are having their Jaguar Award celebration on November 2nd, so I'll be there for that as well. And I'm really excited about the day after our next board meeting, or that week is National Apprentice Week. So we have hired a new coordinator a couple months ago. So she's put together a draft of the events for National Apprenticeship Week. Which has become, as you know, has become very popular and recognized. The apprenticeships and appreciated around the country. And we're on one day, I was noticing on the draft schedule that we'll have 75 students from Sweetwater going to our training center and learning about apprenticeship programs. They'll be doing a solar array. They'll put that together. They'll be doing some pipe bending, have lunch, of course, some day determinations. And then share what they've learned. So I can send this when it gets firmed up, and I'm really excited to see that happen. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pike?
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank Mr. Zumstein and his staff again for allowing us to be here. in air conditioned. Those of you that were here a couple years ago remember the miserableness of 99 degrees. So thank you for the staff. The other thing I wanted to mention is last week myself and Ms. Hall and the teacher, staff, union representative all met and went over some of the things that have been a concern in the district, and it was very enlightening to listen to all the different organizations, union, people, and the different ideas that were in place, everybody working together, trying to find solutions. And there were some interesting things that I had never known, that, for example, the food people have 6 different entrees that they provide for the kids every day, and how difficult that is for their staff to keep all that and things like that. So it was very positive, and I was very appreciative that I was invited. I learned a lot, and thank you very much for that. And my last thing is that I agree that I think Mr. Tarantino mentioned it, but there is a need for communication about exactly what's going on. And we've all heard rumors and stuff, but we need to get something as soon as possible to let us know exactly which people are going to be affected and what's going to happen and things like that, because everybody seems to be on edge, and so hopefully we can get that resolved. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to say thank you to Dr. Janney for, I know you are stepping up to take the responsibility, but together I really do believe this is work that's been needed. We've been working towards it. But when we first came on board in 2014 at the end of the year, that year, there was a lot on our plate. A tremendous amount of work has been done in this district by this leadership, by Dr. Janney and her team, to turn the district's culture and the valuing of teachers and staff has really changed. And I mean, the fear and the negativity was really has a healing began. The culture changed. I remember people saying, wow, I couldn't believe how quickly the climate of change from the negative to the positive. We are not going to abandon that. You know, that hasn't been abandoned. We still value every teacher, every staff member, all of our students, our families. It's a time for tightening the belt, and it's not a time for attacking anybody. We will move forward. We will have this resolved, and it's not. A crisis seems to me to be an overstatement, but I'm going to let people want to say crisis. They love that term, I guess. I really feel that this is not unusual for a district at this point to be facing. If you've checked up and down the state, you'll find a vast number of districts facing, way before we did, the very same thing, because it's a challenge to do all the things we're doing now, to meet the needs of students, to provide good instructional curriculum, staff that can deliver that instruction, and safe environments for our students, and not expect to have staff to deliver that, and support from the central office for that. So I'm glad that we do it. I'm glad we made the choices we made. They are good choices, and when we talk about cuts, a lot of those cuts were to vacancies. They were for savings that were planned but not implemented yet. So it's a lot of the reaction for what's out there in information is really misinformation. So communication, I agree, is key. So I did enjoy going late, though. I got there a little late to 10-year reception. It was really nice. I appreciated it as Mr. Pike. I joined Mr. Pike and the representatives from the different bargaining unions and leadership at the Labor Management Institution meeting we had last week. It was really good. We do have a conversation. People are sharing their concerns, and we're working on this together. I really feel that as a board, we're doing what we can to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And I think that we will work through this, and we will have, I'm very glad to have Ms. Salkeld on board, because I know she's got the experience and the information we need. We'll be hearing from Mr. Delicazada next month on some of the systems, the information systems that where we're moving forward with that. All these things together are what we've been needing to do as a large district, and we are a large district and we're a growing district, and I think we need to ensure that we keep on track with all that. And next month, I'm going to work in getting to my school sites, getting out to a few school sites before the end of next month. But on the 11th of November, I'll be going on the Walk in Remembrance with Hope. It's on a Sunday morning in Balboa Park. And anybody who wants to join the team, it's called Christie's Calling. You can go online and join that team and walk with me. And we'll do a good thing for suicide prevention programs and support for those who have suffered a loss from suicide. So thank you for that, and with that, we are adjourned.